So getting to your question about farming, it's very simple. 2/3 of the people in California have always lived where there's 1/3 of the precipitation. 2/3 of the precipitation and snowmelt occur in two places along the Sierra Nevada mountains and north of Sacramento. So our grandfathers, my grandpa, your great-grandfathers, they came up with an idea. They called the federal project the Central Valley Project, and the state version came in later with a very good governor who happened to be Pat Brown. He sued the Sierra Club as Attorney General prior to that to get this approved. So the idea is, why don't we take the Sacramento tributaries along the Feather, along the Klamath, along the American, and bring dams and then channel that water to go south as it does. But when it gets to the Delta and it floods and these dams will prevent it from flooding, and it'll be measured. And then we will pump it out of the Delta into the aqueduct, and it will go down all down the western side of the San Joaquin Valley. And then what's left from farming, we'll put 5 million acres into production, and then we'll pump it into Los Angeles, which was running out of Colorado River and Owens Valley River water, Colorado River water. And that was the idea. And they had a whole plan. And the genius of those people, this is when we had 15 million people, and they forecasted each state how many you would have to have. About 20 years ago, people from the Bay Area largely, but the coastal corridor, decided that this little smelt in the bay was disappearing. And they said it was the canary in the mine for an ecological disaster, that the rivers were not flowing into the Delta and by extension the bay. So what at the same velocity in the true, it wasn't. Of course, there was 38 million people. So they said, we're going to stop all that water. And they went to court. They didn't get a plebiscite. And they stopped a lot of it. So they started to release 90% of the water that was in the Delta that was fresh. They didn't pump it into the aqueduct. So the people who were farming suddenly got 20%, even in a wet year, not 100. And then the municipalities, of course, needed the water because they were running out. So San Jose started pumping out of the aqueduct, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. So there was almost no water that was the original intent. And this was a multi-billion. So when you talk to those people, and they were not all corporate barons, many of them were on the west side, they would say to you, well, they're putting thousands of farm workers out, farm equipment people, they're putting them out of business. The water table on the west side is 1,500 feet. So where I live, I can pump out of 80 feet with a 15 horsepower and get 1,200 gallons. They got to have a 200 horsepower and they'll get 300 gallons. And the water's no good, it's brackish. So they were really in a bad spot, and they are in a bad spot. But we find out that it really wasn't the oxygen that was smothering the Delta smelt, at least not the primary, or maybe it was just one of many causes. There was invasive striped bass that were gobbling them up like candy. And there was also 35 municipal sewage districts around the bay who were sending in their treated water into the bay, which was diminishing the oxygen and adding nitrates to it. So it was a multifaceted problem, but they just wanted to solve it with this utopian idea. So then people got very angry about this. So in the coastal areas, because they weren't getting enough water either. So they voted to have a bond, 2014, $7.5 billion. And they went back to the California Water Project. And they said, you know what? Millerton Lake on the San Joaquin, there was a plan to build a bigger reservoir right above it to enlarge the river before it got to it's 1.4 million acre feet. And it's going to be very easy to do. It's not in the pristine forest. It's kind of in the foothill. And there's one on the Sites River. And as it comes into the Delta, we can put 1.6 million. And then the San Luis Reservoir had a twin. It was always designed as two, like kidneys. And we never built that. But we'll build all three of them. and we'll get almost 5 million acre feet. An acre feet is the ability to fill up at 1 foot 43,560 square feet of, it's an acre. So it's a huge amount of water. So they passed it. And then, of course, the people who were in the Bay Area sued, and they said, this is long, and there's a 3-spotted this and a 2-winged this, and they stopped it. So they defied the will of the people. And then they used some of that money under Gavin Newsom to go up to the Klamath River, and they said, it'd be so nice to have a whitewater riparian ecosystem. And indigenous people could go back. There were very few indigenous people, but there was 80,000 people who depended on hydroelectric power. So they blew up this summer 4 dams with money that was allotted to create dams. And there was an ecological disaster for 3 months, the mud and everything. And they lost the irrigation water, they lost the flood control, they lost the recreation ugly. And so all the farmers say, why do these people understand that when they go to Whole Foods or they go to Trader Joe's, the food comes from somewhere? And the people of Los Angeles are then asking, what Gavin Newsom said, well, the reservoirs are all full. And what he meant was, we haven't had snow in a month, and we're in drought conditions already. But last year we had a really heavy snowmelt, and I let a lot of the water out, but it's not all gone. So we have 75%, and it's going down each day. But I think Folsom's only 30%. So he basically lied to the Californians and said, I didn't do what I did. They're full. They're not full. And the reservoirs in Los Angeles will not have enough water to be full. So they look at all this, and was this ever voted on? It was voted on one time to build reservoirs. But people they thought, well, these are just stupid farmers and stupid people that want water, and they don't understand the sophisticated ecosystem that I do.